Hey peeps, I have always loved jewelry, and that is why I'm so excited about my brand new sponsor, Katie Waltman Jewelry. Yes, just gorgeous pieces. In fact, you can find earrings like this. I'm going to get in real close. Take a look. Aren't they pretty? I love these. These are called the Opal Star Huggies, and these are just one of many items you can find at katiewaltman.com. She offers beautiful necklaces, those stackable rings, and what I love about these earrings is they go with anything. I mean, opals do. I'm wearing them now with a jean jacket, and you can dress these up, but there's a huge selection. And just for my viewers and listeners of Life Unscripted, you get a 20% off discount off of any of the items. And by the way, it runs out on September 30th. So once again, if you use the promo code Life Unscripted at katiewaltman.com, you'll find those gorgeous pieces of jewelry and you can dress up your outfit like these. In the United States, approximately 1 in every 32 births are twins. And there is just something about the twins phenomena that fascinates so many of us. Joining me on Life Unscripted today is one of the leading experts specializing in the study of twins. Dr. Nancy Segal is the professor of developmental psychology and director of the Twin Studies Center and has been inducted and awarded dozens of times for her lifetime of work and contributions in her research in genetics and behavior, and most notably, of course, her studies on twins. She's written a number of books, including Born Together, Reared Apart, Deliberately Divided, Accidental Brothers, among many others. And she has appeared on Good Morning America. You've seen her on Oprah, also TED Talk, National Public Radio. You name it, she's been pretty much everywhere. Dr. Segal, I am so happy to have you here. I just love this subject, so welcome to Life Unscripted.
Thank you so much. I love being here.
Okay, so you don't have to be a twin, really, or a parent maybe of a twin, to really understand that, twin behavior is something that is really human behavior, and we learn a lot from twins.
That's exactly right. We think of twin studies as kind of a model for understanding the genetic and environmental influences on human behavior. We can study intelligence, personality, interests, values, just about anything. And the book I've just completed, which I hope will be out next spring, will actually look at twins' relationships and what we can learn from them in terms of our own friendships, our own love relationships, our collaborations, who we grieve for. So you really can learn so much for twins. They're like a little microcosm of the world.
That's true. So your interest in twin behavior, is that the result of you being a twin yourself?
Oh, yes. I'm a fraternal twin. I have a sister who looks and acts nothing like me. And as a small child, I was so fascinated with the fact that we grew up together with the same parents, had the same friends, had so many experiences in common, and yet turned out so differently. And when I got to college, high school even, and I learned about genetics, it all made so much sense to me because I knew there had to be something fundamentally different about us. I just didn't know what it was.
Yeah, there is a fascination by so many. I'm one of them. My mother was really interested in genetics and twin behavior. So not that we have any of that in our family, none whatsoever. But we should first talk about some of your studies, the first one being the Minnesota study, which really got a lot of attention. This was in 1981. And tell us about the Jim twins.
Okay. Well, actually, that was not my first study. My first study was my doctoral dissertation on cooperation and competition in twins, so we can get to that later. But the Minnesota study of twins raised apart actually began in 1979. I joined in 1982, and the study went on until 1999, so about 20 years. The Jim twins were the pair that launched the project back in 1979. Professor Thomas Bouchard, who was the director of that study, had heard about a pair of twins, Jim Lewis and Jim Springer, who had grown up apart, about 40 miles apart in the state of Ohio. And when they got together, the story was picked up by the press and simply went viral. These twins were so alike, from their first names to their nail-biting habits to their mixed headache syndromes to their jobs as sheriffs and as part-time McDonald's employees and to their light blue Chevrolets and their penchant for vacationing on the same 3-block strip of beach in Florida. So they really got a lot of attention, and Professor Bouchard's idea was to bring them to Minnesota, maybe find another pair or so, but because of the attention they got, suddenly there were 15 pairs available. And when we ended up, in my book, Born Together, Reared Apart, I have a whole history of the findings and methods and investigators on that project. We ended up with about 137 reared apart twin pairs, mostly identical, but a good number of fraternals as well.
Okay, let's talk about the study. This was a pair of Columbia twins raised in very different situations. And is this when you started to believe environmental experiences really have a much bigger impact than you thought?
No. I always believed that the environment had an impact. It was just a matter of how much. Nothing is purely genetic or environmental. But what the Colombian twin study changed for me was just a greater respect for the environment, particularly when there are extenuating circumstances in extreme environments. So just to lay this out for your listeners, in Colombia, South America, there were 2 sets of twins born a day apart, both identical, both male, one in the lively capital city of Bogota and one about 100 miles to the north in a very rural area. One of the twins in the rural area was very sick at birth. His grandmother brought him to the better hospital in Bogota, where the other twins were, when he was a day old. And when he was released a week later, they gave the family the wrong baby. So they were essentially switched. And it was an unusual case because it was a twin switch in 2 pairs. So one unrelated pair, thinking they were fraternal twins, grew up in Bogota. The other pair, which was the exact genetic replica, grew up in this rural town. And what I learned from that is that the twins raised apart, in this case, were quite different in some respects, particularly intelligence, because the pair in Bogota had gone to college, the pair in the rural town hadn't passed beyond the 5th grade. And I was used to the Minnesota study where most twins came from middle-class backgrounds, where they had access to college and educational resources, and we found very close IQ points between them. But in this case, they were more like the brother they were raised with, the unrelated brother, than they were to the genetically related brother they were not raised with. So it was a different pattern of findings, but made sense in terms of their circumstances.
Okay. Before we get into another study, explain for people what the difference between fraternal twins and identical twins, because not everybody understands that.
Identical twins result when a single fertilized egg divides between the 1st and 14th day after conception. So these twins share all their genes. They're both males or both females. Now, fraternal twins result when a woman releases 2 eggs at the same time, and they're separately fertilized by 2 separate sperm from her partner. These twins are genetically just like ordinary siblings, sharing half their genes on average. But we use the 2 different types of twins to look at genetic and environmental influences on development, because if identical twins are more alike in some measured trait, and they invariably are, relative to the fraternals, this tells us the genes do play some role in the development of that trait.
Okay. Here's another example. You've interviewed so many fascinating people in twins. This one really stood out. The twins raised by a Jewish father in Trinidad and the other a Catholic grandmother in Nazi Germany. Wow. Tell us about that.
That is really an example, Alix, of a very extreme set of environments. And what happened here was that the twin boys were born to a Romanian Jewish father and a Catholic German mother who met on a ship. They ended up in Trinidad. They had a little girl, and 3 years later, identical boys, Jack and Oscar. When the marriage soured, Jack stayed with his father in Trinidad. Oscar moved to Germany with his mom. But see, the press grabbed this and called it Nazi and Jew, and that's not correct. Oscar was only 12 when the war ended. He was not a Nazi. He was just somebody who was very pro-German, always looking for the right belief or the right political system. He was in the Hitler Youth, as all the boys were, but like many of the boys, he looked at it as a chance to get out of going to church and a chance to play sports. When the twins met at 20, it was a cold reunion. They didn't speak the same language. They had very different political and historical understandings. So they left each other, and it seemed unlikely they'd ever meet again. But when Jack's wife, and by this time Jack had settled in California, Oscar was still in Germany. When Jack's wife heard about the study in Minnesota, she decided that maybe they should get in touch with Oscar's family and see if he'd want to participate. And he was very eager to, actually. They were in their 40s now and more mature and really interested in their backgrounds. So they came to Minnesota, and they were very alike in many things in the way they dressed. They showed up at the airports wearing light blue shirts with epaulets and same kinds of glasses and all kinds of things like that. And their personalities were very much the same. But the most interesting thing about those two is that they both knew that had their positions been switched, they would have adopted the philosophy and beliefs that they currently despised. That's a very interesting finding, I think.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, see, if you think about it, identical twins raised apart are the only people who can see themselves in a life unlived. All of us can speculate how our lives might turn out if we'd taken a different partner or taken a different job or gone to a different college. But we can only speculate. Identical twins can really see it.
All right. This study makes a lot of people giggle because we're talking about the giggle twins. That's what you've named them. And explain why they're called the giggle twins.
The giggle twins are actually raised apart as well, and they came to Minnesota for the study. They were from Great Britain. And they had this amazing tendency to just giggle when they were together, not with other people. And they weren't giggling at anything in particular. I suspect it was kind of a nervous reaction. I remember being on a talk show in Minneapolis with those two, and it really got a little out of hand because they kept on giggling. We had to stop the segment. So, but they were a fascinating pair. They both had a small, crooked little finger, and they both concocted a drink called Twin Sin, which was pretty rich in cream and curacao. And they both were pretty apolitical, and they met their husbands at dances. So they had a lot of similarities despite their separate rearing.
Yeah, just the fact that the twins that you've been studying, many pairs of twins, but that they were not raised together and to come back and see each other. Is there one, would you say, when they first lay eyes on each other, have you noticed a certain reaction? I know you haven't been there for every one of them, but what do they usually do?
Well, I've seen a number of reactions. I've seen a number of reunions. And usually, particularly with the identical twins, it's like a moment where they can almost not look at the other one's face because it's so emotionally intense. It's almost like looking in a bright light. You have to turn your face away. It is so emotionally overwhelming. And I find that many of the pairs will touch each other and touch their own faces at the same time to see what the similarities are. Not all twins are jumping up and down. Some do. Some are very quiet in the way that they meet each other, and that's a reflection of their personalities. But for the most part, it's a pretty amazing event, and they usually just hug each other. I worked recently on a set of Brazilian twins, young men who met for the first time, and I happened to watch that reunion yesterday, and they just clung to each other and would not let go.
Wow, that's such powerful stuff. Let's go back to the 1960s. There was a study, unethical, a set of 5 identical twins. And I did see 3 identical strangers, which was the program or the study was done by Dr. Peter Neubauer. And I know you know plenty about that. And you've also been involved in another film, The Twinning Reaction. That's the one you were actually doing consultant work and you added your perspective on.
Right. So the study you're referring to, Alix, was done in the 1960s. It was a prospective study, meaning that twins who were separated by this adoption agency, Louise Wise, were placed into different adoptive homes. And researchers, Dr. Peter Neubauer and a consultant at the Louise Wise who believed in separating twins, arranged for their assistants to go to the homes and study these children. Now, the parents had no idea they were raising one twin. They were just told the kids were in a child development study. Depriving them of their twinship and not informing the families was so completely unethical. It was legal, but it was not unethical. It was unethical.
It was, yeah.
Now, It was very unethical. Now, I wrote about this. I did a very comprehensive treatment of this in the book Deliberately Divided. And in addition to those 5 separated twin pairs, there was an identical triplet set separated, which was the focus of the film Three Identical Strangers, and also included in The Twinning Reaction, the film that I participated in. It stands out as a great example of how not to do research. That's how I see it. And I was hesitant at first to take on this project, but I did because I felt that despite its horrendous this horrendous study, it needed to be told. It's a blemish in the history of twin research, but it has to be told to prevent researchers from ever doing this again. Now, many of those twins have reunited, and they really mourn the loss of a twinship, and many say their lives would have been a lot smoother had they grown up with a partner.
Yeah, some painful consequences there. And it was the fact that it seemed like it was more of an experiment than really research and cruel. Let's talk about, you study identicals where one is homosexual, the other is not. And tell us what you've learned about sexuality and sexual identity. We know 2 different things, but what was that like? What did you find out about it?
Well, many of the findings come from my work, but also from the work of my colleagues. And we find that there is a genetic component to sexual identity, gender identity. But it seems to vary between males and females. It seems to be a little stronger in males, maybe a genetic influence of, say, 30 to 40%. In females, closer to 10 to 20%. I've also studied twins, identical twin females, where one has chosen to undergo sex reassignment surgery because at a very young age, she believed that she was born into the wrong body and should have been a male. And those are really quite fascinating cases because there's such an extreme change in the twinship. But what has impressed me a lot is how happy these twins are once they change gender. And also how the twin who did not change, who felt completely female, was so supportive of the brother. So supportive and so happy, at the same time mourning the loss of that identical aspect, but still, thinking about the greater good.
Wow. It's a special bond between identical twins.
Yes, and if I could just say one thing, studying twins who differ in some way, identical twins, is really another very sensitive test to understand what causes behavior in one and not in the other. And this is all information we can use to manage or prevent behaviors or conditions or whatever in the non-twin population.
These are so refreshing. I want to tell you about my new sponsor. You can probably guess right here. These are Aspire Healthy Energy Drinks. And what I love about these is they are half of the caffeine as most energy drinks. They're 0 sugar and they have delicious flavors like raspberry acai. And this is mango lemonade, which is perfect on a hot and steamy summer day like it is today. And the best part, listeners to my podcast get 20% off of any of the products. So you could buy them at aspiredrinks.com. Don't forget to use the promo code LifeUnscripted. That gives you 20% off. And this is an exclusive offer. So these are kind of green tea powered energy drinks. And I love them. And they give me a little lift in the afternoon without the crash. So cheers to Aspire. I'm having one of those days where I just don't want to get out of bed. And I blame my Cozy Earth pajamas. They are so soft and buttery. They're made of bamboo. I love bamboo. I have this stretchy pajama set in the brook color. Plus my jammies are stretchy so I can dance in them. Along with the cushy ankle sock, which hug my feet perfectly. Also, Cozy Earth was on Oprah's list of favorite things for 7 straight years. Plus, they have bamboo bedding, and the sheets get softer with each wash. And you can have this exclusive discount, 41% off, if you use my promo code. Go to CozyEarth.com and use the promo code LifeUnscripted for 41% off. Any product. This is a fantastic offer. Cozy Earth products are great gifts, or if you just want them for yourself, get cozy with Cozy Earth. I'm going back to bed.
Alex, I actually have a study of twin loss that has close to 600 twins in it. And what is really interesting is that even though fraternal twins occur in the population with twice the frequency as identicals, in my study, I have about 75% identicals showing up for the study. So that, again, tells you just how grief-stricken they are. When we look at ordinary twin relationships, we find that identicals do seem to be closer to each other than fraternals, and that is mirrored in the loss of the twin. And it's a very, very devastating loss. The grief goes on, a lifetime. And what I also do is I have the twins, the surviving twins, both identical and fraternal, rate their grief intensity, not just for the twin who died, but for any other relatives who died in their lifetime, such as a mother, a father, a non-twin sibling, a grandmother, an aunt, a cousin, a friend, a coworker. And I find that for all the twins, it's the twin who was rated the highest.
All right, Dr. Segal, if you can, do you have some advice for parents out there who perhaps have an identical twin or twins in general? What should they do? What should they not do?
Well, I think that parents should allow their twins to enjoy the twinship. It's a special relationship. Identical twins are likely to be especially close, although there's overlap. They may like to do the same things, and I think they should be allowed to do that. I think with identical twins, you want to make sure that people can tell them apart. You don't want them just calling them twin. Another thing for both pairs of twins, identical and fraternal, is that you want them to have exposure to adults one-on-one. That will really enhance their language development. We find that many twins, especially boys, lag behind non-twins because they're so used to being with one another, and they develop private words, gestures, expressions, phrases, things like that. So you want to make sure that they have exposure to learning language environments outside of the twinship.
Well, you have so much knowledge in this area, and Dr. Segal, I really appreciate you taking the time. Your work is fascinating. Again, whether you're a twin, or not, there's so much that we can learn from her studies, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today on Life Unscripted.
It's been my pleasure, Alex. Thank you.